Hello and welcome everyone. I'm going to get started here and we'll give folks a few more minutes to kind of hop on. But it's nice to see you all today. It's a lovely day here in Wisconsin and I hope it's lovely where you are as well. My name is Lauren Langworthy and I'm the Director of Special Projects at Wisconsin Farmers Union. I wanted to thank you for joining us to WFU's Winter Meeting series, pun intended, as we look closely at the challenges that have been surrounding meat processing in Wisconsin and explore some possible solutions. Today, we're looking at how labor fits into the meat processing puzzle. Wisconsin Farmers Union is a member-driven organization. We're committed to enhancing the quality of life for farmers, rural communities, and all people through educational opportunities, cooperative endeavors, and civic engagement. Meat processing was selected as a special order of business in 2020 and again in 2021 by our members through a democratic process. That's why we're looking at it now. As we examine this issue, we're looking at it through the lens of the Farmers Union Triangle: education, cooperation, and legislation. If you like what you hear today or throughout these sessions, we hope you'll consider joining Wisconsin Farmers Union as an active member. If you don't live in Wisconsin, that's okay. We'll gladly connect you with a Farmers Union chapter in your state. Just a few housekeeping bits before we get started. This event is being recorded. We'll be sharing it on the WFU YouTube channel shortly after the session. We'll send you a link as soon as the recording has been uploaded. We're also excited to hear any questions that you may have. You can ask those by clicking the Q&A button down in the center of your screen. We also know that meat processing is an issue affecting people all across Wisconsin, and we want to hear from you. We want to collect as many short stories as possible from farmers and processors so that we can better share the impact of this issue across the state. You can do this by following the link that Kirsten will be dropping in our chat. Finally, you can learn more about meat processing and the issues we're talking about, the work WFU is doing, and how you can get involved on our website. That's another link that will be popping up in the chat here momentarily. With that, I want to thank and welcome our panelists for the day. We're pleased to have three folks joining us. We've got Jake Bailey from United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Jim Ridderbush, who brings with him 35 years of work experience in packing houses, and Jake Seiler, owner of Seiler's Meats, a small processor in Elmwood, Wisconsin. At this time, I'm going to be turning it over to our panelists. Each of them are going to have 10 minutes to introduce themselves and their initial thoughts on the subject. I'll flag each of you when your time is up if you're going over, so keep an eye on me. After introductions, we'll follow up with a few questions that have been prepared ahead of time, as well as some questions from the attendees. Again, if you move your mouse down on the bottom center of your screen as an attendee, you'll see the Q&A function where you can drop a question there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake Bailey to introduce himself.
Hi, thanks for having me. Like you said, my name is Jake Bailey. I am currently the Secretary Treasurer of the UFCW Local 1473 in Wisconsin. I just was elected as president, and I'll take over at the end of the current president's term. I started off in the food industry working in a cannery down in Janesville, Wisconsin, where they process vegetables. At Seneca Foods, I started there in about 2001. I've kind of worked my way through that entire industry, and then as there was a union shop, I started off as just a rank and file member. I became a steward, got on bargaining committees, was hired on staff in 2011, and then I represented meat packing plants and cannery plants and vegetable plants on the southern part of the state. And then I became the director in 2015, and that expanded my territory to all of Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan, where we represent about 6,000 members in meat packing and food processing. And then I became Secretary Treasurer last year, and then President-elect right now. You know, we represent in the meat processing plant a kind of a diverse world. We have cut kill operations. We represent sausage makers and a lot of co-packers, and they're vastly different industries inside of the meat world. So at some point today, I'll probably talk about all three, but a cut kill facility that's a smaller operation versus a larger operation is two totally different worlds when you come to this industry. In a small shop, it's slower lines, it's easier to control safety and ergonomics and things like that. When you get into some of the larger processors, some of those things change and line speeds become an issue. Safety becomes a real issue. Ergonomics is a major issue. I mean, when you're working inside of these plants, these are skilled jobs. I know lots of people don't really think of it that way, but doing this work, you have to know what you're doing. You're working with a knife, you're working in close quarters. If you're operating heavy machinery, you're operating it inside of very tight quarters where there's a lot of people and it's extreme conditions. It's either super hot in these plants, very cold in these plants. The floors are slippery. I mean, it's a dangerous industry to be in. So it's very important to have a union there to protect the workers, to be able to bring our expertise from across the country. And, the US and Canada, we represent a lot of workers. So we see these things all over. But the biggest thing that I've seen in the 10 years that I've been doing this is when these large corporations that dominate and can continue to consolidate these industries and eat up some of the smaller players, the things that have really changed is the workforce changes. I mean, we have seen a shift from when I first started, it was, and Jim will probably hit on this too, it was primarily white men that were in this industry. And over the years, it has changed. And we have probably 50-50 female men ratio. And then we have very diverse groups in these plants. I mean, we have Burmese workers, South African, Hispanic workers, Hmong workers. I mean, just about every year it seems to shift, and we have an influx from a different area of workers that's coming in here. And so the dynamic has changed. Communication has changed in these plants. Safety has changed. Relationships with USDA inspectors and with other inspectors that come in these plants have changed. As they get bigger, you just don't have that same personal relationship that you used to have years ago, where you knew the inspector and you knew what they wanted and how they wanted it set up. Those things have changed so drastically, and along with OSHA standards, and with the last administration in here, what was highlighted with the poultry line speeds was a major shift in our industry. And these things are constantly changing, which I think Jim Ridderbush will be able to kind of hit on more, as he's in these plants every single day doing this. But those are the biggest things that we've seen as these big, huge, there's really like four main players that kind of own all of the industry, and they've ate up a lot of the smaller players that kind of just push them out because they can spend more money. So that's what I have for an intro.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to Jim next. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me to your meeting. Definitely always like to educate people on meatpacking, because I've been here, Smithfield, JBS, Packerland Packing. Been 3 different companies since I've been here. Been here about 36 years, actually. I started counting. Been a steward for about 34 years. Worked on the line as a working steward. I've been in this labor liaison position for a little over 8 years. So my job is to facilitate, to make sure that we follow the contract that we've agreed upon between the company and the workers as the union. I'm very involved in the safety aspect of things that go on the plant. So that's kind of my specialty, is the safety and health. So we do tours to make sure that, that things are safe. It is a very diverse workforce. Excuse me. Very diverse workforce. When I started here, kind of like Jake was saying earlier, there was only maybe 6 Hispanic working people in the plant, and now there's majority is Hispanic or other countries. We have probably about 8 different languages that are spoken in the plant right now. So that's a little of my history. I'm also involved in the community a lot here up in Green Bay. I'm vice president of the Greater Green Bay Labor Council. I'm a vice president of the Green Bay Neighborhoods. I'm president of my neighborhood association. So we like to get involved with our community, because sometimes employers think that we're just here to stick it to them, but that's not true. We're all doing things in the community to we've had food pantries, diaper drives, blanket drives, things like that to help out in the community. So that's my spiel, and I'm looking forward to whatever questions that your panel can throw at me. Hopefully we can get the answers to you. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And next we'll move on to Jake Seiler.
And good morning. Yes, my name is Jake Seiler from Seiler's Food Market in Elmwood, Wisconsin. And yes, thank you, Lauren, for asking me to be involved in this. I guess my background here is I've been in the meat industry all my life. I'll be 49 here come April. Our family business started in 1923 when my great-grandpa came over from Austria and got this going in Elmwood in 1923. And now I'm owners with me and my wife. My wife Leslie and I had taken it over from my dad, or my dad and I had taken it over, and now it's just Leslie and I. So we have a small, what I call a family business, but family business family, two different entities, but we try to stay as a business family because we care about our employees and keeping them busy and so on and so forth. So I'm the 5th generation in our family, meat cutters, 4th in Elmwood. We have a more or less just a custom slaughter plant, processing facility here in Elmwood. We built a new one in 2006, and we had literally outgrown that approximately 5 years ago, 8 years ago, and we've purchased another property. So now we have 40.3 acres just off I-94, 11 miles north of Elmwood here. So we're hoping to expand into that to help some of this slaughter capacity in the future. But as of right now, we are a custom processor of beef, buffalo, sheep, goats, and hogs. And we have a retail store, we do wholesale, and we are getting into doing more and more a lot of private label. So when we left the old building back in 2006, we built a new facility in 2006. When we left there, we had 7 employees and 5 of us were family. So we kind of all woke up in the middle of the night, and we all came to work. We all knew it had to be done, but now it's different. It's just so much different. Now we have 35 or 36 employees, and our footprint of our 10,000 square foot facility is just way overcrowded. So we need to expand to make life easier again for us. But times have really changed as far as the workforce and what has come down the pipe over the last 5-10 years. But otherwise, that's pretty much tells you about me, I guess. So I don't know if that was enough or if you have any questions.
Yeah, that's a great start. And we can start asking some questions, and hopefully a few will pop up in the Q&A from our attendees. I see we've got a little over 50 people on, so hopefully some of them have questions they'd like to ask. But, I might just start with Jim and ask you about the work environments that you've experienced. You mentioned kind of some of the consolidation that's happened or some of the name changes that have happened over your time. And I'm curious, what are some of the differences between the larger plants you've worked in and the smaller ones? What are some of the things you've seen in terms of, speed or health concerns or management training? How have those changed over the years?
Well, to be honest with you, we've never been a small plant because we've pretty much over, I want to say the last 20 some years, we pretty much do anywhere from 1,900 to 2,000 head a day. So we've never been small, but safety aspect, I mean, when you work in a plant this size, you're going to have wet floors, slippery conditions, you're working with knives, hooks, saws. But, being on a safety council, think we have a union here, that we have a safety council that participates in all the safety and health. We have safety coordinators that are on every line that do PPE checks, personal protective equipment, to make sure that everybody's following the same safety guidelines. And we do trainings. The company does trainings every year. We also bring in our international safety training department every couple of years to do training with our safety council members so that we keep them up to date on health and safety.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Jake. I know, sorry, Jake Seiler, I should be specific. In a smaller scale processing plant like yours, I know that worker retention is really important. So, thinking about workers and welfare, what are some of the things that you've put in place to make sure that you can retain workers, and what does that mean to you when they leave?
I guess for us, it boils down to we're more that family business, like I was explaining. So we're a little more close to our employees, maybe say such as Jim, right? Because he doesn't get to interact with them on a daily basis. So we try to retain, because it's more, we're all family. We're all in this together. We give them a little more flexibility in their work schedule. So in other words, if we have someone who's pregnant, or if kid gets sick, they got to go home and they got to go get the kid out of school and things like that. We're a little more forgiving that way, but we don't have those lines, at this point right now with like what Jim's dealing with, because when you take someone off the line, everything changes. And that happens with us a little bit. I mean, it does, but not as drastic as the bigger plants, right? So we're a little more forgiving. We have that ability to be more forgiving, to work with our employees so that they can take their daughter to the eye doctor or whatever may come up. So we have that flexibility. It turns into some pay, right? We're not in. We try to pay our employees as much as we possibly can. We give them we just restructured our business with PTO, paid time off, to give them a little more time so that they can do those things with their family or take care of their kids. Because I know that's very important to us and it's important to our employees. So I guess that's what I would say.
And Jake Bailey, thinking about unionized shops versus non-unionized shops, what are some of the changes that you see in kind of labor welfare or interest in working in those places?
I think there is a drastic difference in these big facilities when it comes to having a union shop or a non-union shop. It's hitting on some of the things that we had talked about. It's pay rates. It's health and safety. Having these safety committees is vital, and the other guys have talked about it. In these plants, they're not bad working conditions, but they're working conditions that you have to be aware of what's going on. You're working in a tight space with, maybe in like Jim's plant, maybe 50 or 100 people right in the exact same area, all using a hook and a knife and saws, and it's fast paced moving in those facilities. If you don't have somebody there like Jim Ridderbush that can look out for you, those line speeds aren't monitored. When you have call-ins and when you don't have people coming into the plants, you don't always have coverage. So you're working harder. You have more chances for injury. That's the big thing. That's what we've put in place in some of these large facilities, is we've got checks and balances to make sure that the workers, because the workers don't always know, and a lot of times they can't communicate with the diverse workforce, especially in Jim's plant. You're talking about 7 or 8 different languages, and there's many different groups and different dialects and things like that. So if we didn't have a Jim there monitoring that, it just goes unchecked, and the workers can't communicate all the time, or won't communicate because they're nervous. They don't want to lose their job. These jobs in these bigger plants, it's not like a smaller shop like what Jake is talking about. Here you're only trained to cut a certain piece of meat. So you're only looking for that one slab coming down the line, and then you're going to cut it up into a smaller portion that's then going to go off to a retail grocery shop, and then they're going to cut it down from there into whatever they want to put in their display case. It's not like where you're butchering an entire animal.
And if I might jump in, just to add to that, because of where Jim's at and what Jake is saying, and that's exactly where we're at right now with the employees that we have, is that we are now putting in a whole new safety program that we will deal with our employees. It'll be a big deal in the beginning. And then I don't know, how often do you guys have these safety meetings? Is this like a once a month thing? Because this is all new to me, but these are the things, because of us, the size of our plant that's growing. It is very important that, those safety measures are taken care of with your employees. And we have mostly white and Hispanics working here. We have a few of them that are bilingual, and that language is also a barrier for us for hiring people too, if they're not bilingual for different areas.
Yeah, and that an interesting point has been brought up here that I'd love to hear Jim's thoughts on. In the sort of plant that you're working in, knowing what kinds of skills that you need to be doing that job, Do you feel like you're well prepared to maybe go to a different processing facility or a small shop or start your own? Or what would you need in order to make that kind of a jump?
Basically, I mean, once a lot of people start here, they don't have any skills at all. I mean, they really have no knife skills. They put them through a very good training process that they have here at JBS in Green Bay. I noticed somebody asked where I was, but once you start learning the different cuts of meat, you could go. The sky's the limit. I mean, myself, I've been doing this so long. I actually have a little venison processing business that I run here in Green Bay. So it depends on where you want to go with it. I mean, if you want to, expand, become a supervisor or trainer, I mean, sky's the limit. I mean, we're a big corporation, and I have conversations with corporate people that come in our plant all the time, and they're from Omaha and all over the country, and the sky's the limit of what you want to do. But like in Jake's situation, you're a small place. I mean, safety is very important, but we meet monthly, and we have a monthly safety committee meeting. And then myself and the chief steward, we actually do a walk through the plant once a month, and we bring up safety hazards, to the company, and we bring them forward, and we make sure that there's a corrective action to try to get things fixed.
And I just want to ask Jake Seiler too, and then I'll move on to another topic. But as you're looking at bringing on labor, what are some of the things that are maybe a little bit different in your sort of facility as opposed to a JBS in terms of hiring?
I guess for us, bringing on employees, it's trying to get people that are interested in this industry. That's why, kind of off the question, that's why I'm part of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Meat Lab. I'm on the advisory committee for that. And we're doing everything we can to get this up and going and get programs out there to get people involved, get people interested in this. And I'm also vice president of the Wisconsin Association of Meat Processors. I've been on different talks and different things. And I mean, I believe, and I'm even going to work on heading this up, but we need to get this into these kids' heads at the high school level. I want them thinking about where they want to go to school, what they want to do. We need these trade jobs back. What they're doing for Jim, like he says, they have people that can train. They have people, I mean, they're big enough to have people that can just train them to cut that top butt off that pin bone as it's coming down the line, or separate this from this. So here at Seiler's, I mean, we're all doing it. So you have to bring someone in, and then you have to teach them. And then it just takes so much more time. I have a guy starting on Monday who has 25 years of experience in the meat industry, but he left to go work auto body, and he's starting on Monday. And so I'm so excited that he jumped back into the meat industry because he knows the demand and he knows that it's there. So you can work your way up the line here too. I mean, you can come in, you can start as a trimmer, you can start on washing carcasses, and then we get the knife skills into their hands, and they can start breaking animals, and then they can start skinning. Who knows? I mean, the sky's the limit working for us also. I always bring people in and I always ask them, well, what's your interest? Is it making sausage? Is it cutting animals? Is it slaughtering? But what we are looking at doing too, as far as moving forward, is getting into more automation, getting in instead of actually electrical stimulating our hogs. I mean, in the new facility, I mean, we plan on having a CO2 pit. Things will be scalded. We won't have to teach anyone to skin pigs anymore. I mean, I'm the guy right now. I mean, I have a few other ones that have picked up on it, but I can't skin pigs forever. So, we're going to be changing our direction of which way we're going. And then it's more of teaching, but it's still that skill. It's still a trade. And I want people to understand, and kids in high school to start thinking about, this is a trade that you can do for the rest of your life, get paid good. It just takes a lot of hard work and dedication. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I do want to make a quick plug to say that our next meeting webinar is going to be talking about some of the training programs available around the state. So we will dig into that more. I see some questions in the chat about details on those courses, and we might hold them off till next time. But I would like to ask the question that's popped up here in the chat around how COVID has impacted each of your roles. And so maybe we could start with Jake Bailey and just go around and how have things been different in the last year with COVID?
It's two totally different worlds. So what we did before COVID versus what we did after COVID is just drastically different. Before COVID, you might have 25, 35 people on a line, a processing line, a fab line coming down. You're shoulder to shoulder with people. Everybody's got a knife. Everybody's got a hook. Everybody knows their piece of meat. That line is moving at the speed of how many people are staffed there. Once COVID hit, these plants totally changed. I mean, we already wear a lot of PPE in these facilities. You got to wear the coats and the hard hats and ear protection and face shield or glasses, depending on what your job is in the plant. And then couple that with having to wear a face mask and a tight face shield up against that. Now you have to constantly sanitize. You have to spread the workers out. You have to slow the lines down so the workers can stay up. Unfortunately, we saw people get sick. We saw people pass away from this. I mean, we represent a lot of plants, and the plants you heard about in the evening news over the last year, those were the plants that we represented. So we had to basically start from scratch on how to even run some of these facilities. And Jim will probably be able to get into a lot more detail because he was on the ground when this was going through, and we had workers. I mean, it was a revolving door of people that were either having symptoms, and then, you had to go through the test and all the questions and this and that. And it was a process. It was a major process, and it took months to get everything worked out to where it is like today. There is no issue. You can go into these facilities and you can work safe. It's more PPE and it's more knowledge, and it's understanding that you've got to sanitize more frequently and wear gloves and make sure you're changing out your face mask and all of these things. But it has been it's two totally different worlds than what we saw before.
Go ahead, Jake. I see you've unmuted yourself.
Okay, well, I didn't know if Jim wanted to go. For us in a small plant, I was extremely scared and nervous when it came into our building. It came in here on September 14th. I'll never forget it. I got a phone call from the public health department, and I had some employees who had been in contact with someone who had the COVID. They needed to leave immediately. They needed to be tested. I learned a lot in a very short period of time. Then what ended up happening was altogether, we ended up losing 13 employees out of our facility in a matter of 3 to 4 days because of close contact, because they were working in close contact, because they weren't feeling well. So we made some stay home, some got tested, some didn't. So everything in a small plant here like this really came to a quick halt in a heartbeat, because when everybody's here to work together and half of your crew leaves, things become a challenge. So thankfully, the ones that didn't have any symptoms, didn't come down with anything, we kept working. We ended up canceling a week of slaughter. So we ended up canceling, I think it was 28 beef and 37 hogs or something like that. And that's kind of a big deal for us when you're booked out 30 months, right? So once we got everybody back, we absorbed the hogs within 2 weeks. We started working Saturdays. We got that done, and it took us, because of how many animals we do and only having so much rail space, it took us 5 or 6 weeks just to absorb those beef. And I know that doesn't mean much to anybody, but it was really a hard challenge. And I'm so proud of our team because they stood up to the plate and they took a hard swing. We worked Saturdays. We did everything we had to get things caught back up to ground zero, and it all worked out. So it was a big challenge for us. I'm sure, like it was for Jim, I'm sure he will say, it's just that things really come to a big halt for us, truthfully.
So yeah, it was quite trying time here at JBS. I'm sure you saw it all over the news. Everybody was nationwide. I had it. I had COVID when they announced the first case. I was already sick, didn't realize it. So, but it slowed the lines down dang near to, we were going about 260 a head an hour down to under 100 head an hour. So then we actually ended up closing because it was so slow, very, very little profitable to keep running the lines when nobody's here. So yeah, and the fact of the matter is you work in such close quarters, and all it takes is one person comes in with it. And when you're dealing with refrigeration, that you're breathing, you're working hard, you're working close to close, elbow to elbow, and the refrigeration's stirring the air around, and it doesn't take much of the air molecules are being stirred up and everybody's breathing. And at that time we had no masks, because when it first came out, you couldn't find masks. I mean, they weren't even available when this first came out. So after the first case was notified, I think was within about 2 days, then we end up getting the mask. That's why I put my helmet and my mask on here to show everybody. It's not fun. You work on a kill floor and it's hot, hotter than hell in the summertime. And you got that mask on and you're breathing and you're sweating and it gets wet. You can't wear glasses because they fog up. It's definitely challenging. I can't wait till it goes away. So everybody get their shots so you can make the stuff go away.
Yeah, thank you each for sharing your stories about that. I know just watching headlines and being a small scale producer myself, knowing that my butcher was going, working extra Saturdays and late nights, and clearly there was an issue, and it shows some of the fragilities of the whole system. So it's something important for us to think about. I'm seeing a handful of questions here around wages, and so maybe that's something we could dig into a little bit. Folks are asking, what's union wage for an apprentice or journeyman? What's starting wage? What's pay potential? Yeah, do we want to just dig into that a little bit? I know we don't necessarily have exact numbers in front of us, but what's a range?
Well, in our world, there's a sausage maker versus a meat cutter who is in a retail facility are two totally different worlds. I would say all of the union wages that plants that we represent, it's a wide range of what the pay rates are. I would say starting is somewhere around that $15 an hour mark where you're coming in with no skill set. And I would say that the potential is that 30-ish range is what we're seeing for butchers, but it's a skill set. What you're doing in a sausage plant versus what you're doing in a retail shop where you're breaking down or used to be breaking down an entire animal is a different skill set. You got to be skilled to do sausage making, but you really got to be skilled to understand each cut of meat and be able to break that down. Some of that has went away over the years, and we see less and less actual butchers. They're more meat cutters now. What Jim's plant is, they break the animal down and they send it in boxes into the retail setting, and then they break it down from there. But I would say the starting wages are somewhere around $15 an hour, and then go up to about 30 is what we see for a skilled butcher or meat cutter.
Packing house starts at $17.95 right now and goes up to right around 25. And I always tell people, because when I started here back in 1983, I started at $5.50 an hour, and I do new employee orientation every week, and I tell everybody how lucky you are to start at $17.95 in the packing house.
So then, coming from me here at Seiler's, I guess I'm not too out of line, truthfully. I guess for someone who comes in and knows, let's say absolutely nothing, we like to start them at 13. If they come in and they, have some knife skills and actually can say, I can keep a knife sharp. Well, that's a huge thing. I mean, we all know how, nothing worse than a dull knife, right? So we've started as many as we've started them as 14 and 14 and a half, and then we go with 90 days, and then we give them a raise after that. Our top cutters and sausage makers at this point are probably 20. I know one would be at 22, 23, and maybe the top in this facility is 25, 26. So, it's not too out of line, but the expectation is very high too, right? Because they have to know a lot more than, I don't want to say a lot more, but they have to be more diverse to be able to take a carcass, the whole hanging half as it comes out of our cooler, break it down and give them all the cuts It's more specific cutting for individuals versus the same cut, putting it in a bag, putting it in a box. So we actually take it all the way down to fabricating those steaks and different thicknesses. Everybody wants something different. You know, this guy might want beef roast out of his, and this guy might not. This guy might want the flat irons ripped out. You know, we have to be able to have that knowledge of doing more with said carcass. So it makes me feel a little good, I guess, that we're not out of the line, I guess, right?
Yeah, and one other kind of question along these same lines, what would be an average retention rate, and what sort of other benefits might be available at your operation in terms of healthcare coverage or retirement or financial investments? Are those things that folks in your facility might have access to?
For me, I guess, quick, as long as I'm here, I guess we have, well, our biggest challenge is healthcare at this point. Right now we have a 401k, or I should say it's a simple IRA, and we match 3%. So whatever they put in, we'll match up to 3%. We have a good paid time off. We have the family business, I guess, that we say. Vacation time, we've upped all that. And like I said, healthcare is our biggest problem. Right now, we do not have healthcare for our employees. We are working that out with our accountants. I would say within the next 6 months, we will have full benefits. We want to be able to pay if the employee wants to buy it on the marketplace, we will then reimburse. Or we're working with 2 different companies that we would pay, let's say, up to 80% and possibly even pay up to 20% for their family members. Because my vision right now is that we need to get these people in here who want to be that stakeholder, that bread take home person that has the health care, that they can actually provide it for their wife or their kids. And I don't know how else to do it other than to help pay for it. You know, it's going to be a challenge, but that's kind of where we're looking at. So those are the things that we offer.
We could help you out with that. You join our union and we can get you in the union healthcare plan.
So what does the union healthcare plan look like?
So I think really for us, because we're not just a single shop, we represent, probably 25 different plants. They vary from plant to plant. Some are in the health fund that the local has, and we have our own healthcare that is relatively inexpensive, has very good coverage. Jim is in a company provided plan. Some of our other facilities are in company provided plans, or plans with different local unions throughout the country. It just varies. A lot of them are Taft-Hartley funds and things like that. We bring to the table a lot of times similar things that Jake had said. Most of our shops have pension or 401k matches. They have the health, every one of them has health benefits of one way or the other. And then they have all the other protections that are specific to each plant. Each plant has different rules in their contract. All of them have a grievance procedure on how to remedy a situation if they have a problem on the floor. If they have any safety concerns, it's all spelled out in there, like what they can and cannot do, what they can refuse to do, things like that is what most of our plans are a little different. Each contract is a little different.
And yes, I'm very interested in learning more. That's why when I do these things, you always learn something. So I thought with our business moving forward, you never know where it's going to end up, right?
You look at a Woodman's. That's where Woodman's started. They were in our union insurance plan until they got their self established, and then they broke away from it. But it's a good thing to look into to start with. I mean, just by having a union contract and having the benefits, you basically run it the same way you do, except for, I guess, like we say in union union terms is your employees have a say in what goes into the workplace also.
I'm also seeing a couple of questions while we're on kind of the wage and benefits topic, asking about some of the different ways in which wages have been impacted and wage equity, and specifically what percentage of the processing cost is labor. And I'm not sure if that's something I've ever looked into before, but I was wondering if anyone here has a sense of roughly what that percentage might be.
So again, it's going to vary by industry and by plant and by owner. Some owners are more frugal than others. I'd say the labor probably around that 14 to 16% is what the labor budget is going to be based off of profitability. I think that's kind of a tough question to answer, but that's about the best ballpark figure I can give you from what I see. We don't always know exactly how much a company, like I don't know exactly how much Green Bay is profiting because it's a global company. So a lot of times it's not broken down specifically to that plant, but I would say it's somewhere between that 14 and 16% is what we see typically.
But you have to remember also, we have a rendering plant, and I'm sure Jake probably has to pay a lot of money to get rid of his, his product, the guts, as we call it, and the bones and the hides and stuff, where our plant processes all of that. And that's all, profit. The rendering makes a lot of money. They turn the bones and the fat and whatever is not consumed by human into dog food or cat food or turkey feed.
For me, couldn't text my wife fast enough because I don't know those numbers like I probably should. I know that whatever our gross income is, the next thing, the top line is obviously going to be payroll. Our labor costs are the next in line. I mean, that's even before cost of goods. But it's a little different with us because, we have two different entities going on in our business because we're buying in product and then we sell it, whether it goes out retail or whether it's a quarter, half a beef type thing. But the reason ours is so high is because everything we do, we pay all the labor, and everything we do is labor intensive. So it would have to be broke down a little different on my end, like how much labor is involved with custom processing and how much labor is involved with our retail. But I wouldn't be afraid to say that ours was probably closer to I would even be afraid to say 50 or 60% of that line item. I don't know I'll find out, but I don't know at this time, truthfully, but it's right up there.
Well, thank you all for at least estimating. I think it's helpful to get kind of a general understanding of roughly what we're looking at here. There's also a question around like, what is the average time of a shift? Are you looking at 8 hours, 10? Do you get paid overtime? And then again, that question of roughly how long do people tend to work in your facility?
So for us, they're never shorter than 8-hour shifts unless it's a Saturday, or if there's an emergency where something goes on, it's typically an 8, 10, or 12-hour shift. Each plant is a little different. We see all kinds of different shifts out there, whether it's a swing shift, whether it's a 3-2 schedule, whether it's a Monday through Friday schedule, just depends on the facility. But never usually less than 8 hours do we see in any of our plants.
Yeah, our shifts are actually lately, the kill's been getting done a little early, but the fabrication's been doing like 10 hours a day. But our pay is anything over 40 hours or the 6th workday is time and a half, which is a really good benefit. So that if you work at 1 hour one day, it counts as a work day. You come in on Saturday, you still get time and a half. That's because we have a union contract. Our competitor down the road doesn't do that.
And for us, our hours of operation are from 7 to 3:30. That's when we have USDA inspection in the building. But we actually start at 6. There's some days we pay the overtime. There's just, for a small plant like us, there's always something we can do prior to operations. And then there's always things that we can do after hours. Where we don't have to apply a legend, we can get away with that. So we can actually still be packaging product, whether that's ready to eat product or whether that's fresh product. We just can't apply a legend to anything at that time. And then those things then happen the next day within those hours. So yeah, we're always in that minimum. I mean, I don't know of anybody really that works 8 hours anymore. So it's 8 to 11 hours is what I would say. Most of our employees are here.
And I have a question here for Jim specifically. Have you seen any significant changes in the operation you work with after the different changes in ownership?
Yes. happens. I mean, let's face it, you get different management, people have different styles. The work and stuff is pretty much the same. I mean, I say when I was Packerland, it was like this was our home base. So that has changed. So, if there's a payroll issue, it's not like they can just cut you a check now because our corporate headquarters in Greeley, Colorado. But different management, different style. I can say that's the main thing.
And another question that's come up a few times in WFU circles is, what are some ways in which farmers can better help all of these plants run effectively? So from your perspective, what are ways in which farmers can either support the work you're doing or be better advocates?
As long as the cattle comes in at a steady pace, it helps our hours be controlled. When they had a drought back, I don't know how many years ago, we were actually getting cattle away from Texas, and it was crazy here. They were working 6 days a week for 5 years straight. I mean, it was repetitive, and people get burned out when you work them that many hours. The way we do it now is we pretty much do it like every other Saturday on a rotating basis. But yeah, if as the cattle come in, but I understand the farmers, when it's time to get rid of Bessie, they got to get rid of Bessie, before she tips over, because if it falls over on the truck, unfortunately, they're not going to get anything for it.
I'm just going to piggyback off of that. I mean, when that drought happened or things like that happen, and farmers end up having to sell off animals and sell off, large parts of the herd, we are getting abused. I mean, we're working 12-hour shifts in these extreme conditions. We're working sometimes 6, sometimes 7 days in a row. A lot of times in these facilities, they're exempt from the 1 day off and 7 rule, which unfortunately, if we don't bargain into the contract, they don't get time off. And again, the work that we're doing using a knife, you can't go on robot mode. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to know who's standing behind you, how close they are, make sure you're not swinging your hook where somebody's hand's at. So, it's definitely challenging when something happens and farmers have to sell off large quantities of the herd at one time. I mean, when farmers are being abused, so aren't the workers in these plants.
And then for me, I'm the total opposite of what Jim's dealing with, is because Jim depends on the farmers to ship the cattle and then get bought and come to him. Me, on the other hand, we control what we do on a weekly basis, and we have things scheduled. Now, with this whole COVID, I understand what they're saying about drought. I think of that. I think of back in '88 when it was around here, and yes, down in Texas. But now with this whole COVID thing, communication to me is the most key, because what everybody decided to do was to call the locker plant and get some animals booked so that they had them on the books. And like right now, we are 30 months out on booking beef, which is ridiculous. Now, the part that really makes me angry is that I set up our trucking on a given Monday night. Every Monday night, I line up my trucking, whether I'm hauling them or they're bringing them in, and we send out paperwork. It's a letter of confirmation 3 weeks prior to even our slaughter date, so that they can confirm they have these animals. They tell us who's getting them, so we can get cutting lined up, things like that. But what's happening, and is happening already, is that people are canceling what they have booked. We don't have anything to butcher, or, well, nobody wants it right now. And that is becoming a huge challenge on our end, because we want to stay full. If we're booked out 30 months, we want to make sure we're running this place at capacity. And right now we're running at about 125% capacity. So for me, on my end, it's more of a communication thing with the individual farmers, making sure that they have what they have booked, that they're planning on bringing them in. And if they're not going to bring them in, we simply request that we have a 9-day notice so that we can keep moving and get someone else in here. So for me, it's all about communication.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all really good insight. It's helpful to think about how we can be supportive from our perspective as well. I have 2 more questions here that have popped up around COVID. One asking if you've seen unions, from the union perspective, and in particular, if injuries have gone down as line speeds have slowed. I'm not sure if that's something that either of you would have information about, but if you do, we'd love to hear it.
I would say no. I mean, when you're doing repetitive work, whether, you're doing, 2,000 head a day or 1,000 head a day, yeah, the line speed slow down, but you're still doing the repetitive work all the time. And you're going to have, carpal tunnel and elbows, shoulders. It's still going to happen. It may lighten up a little bit, but that only lasts for a short period of time. And then all of a sudden the lines go right back up.
Yeah, I would agree. What we've seen is I don't think there's probably been a decrease in the total number of people that have been injured, but it's the same injuries, the repetitive stuff, the ergonomic stuff. That's what we see the most of. You don't typically see somebody getting a hook put in their hand or something like that. It's typically carpal tunnel, a wrist injury, shoulder injuries, depending on what you're doing. If you're putting pork bellies up on a hook, you're going to have that shoulder problem, or you might twist or pull your wrist or something like that. That's what we still see a lot of. And I mean, we try to put things in place to prevent that, but when the lines are moving, whether they're moving slow or fast, you're doing the same thing over and over all day long for 6 days a week in most plants.
And just to piggyback on that question, are there some ways that, without going into too much detail, some ergonomic ways that we can avoid some of that wear and tear on the cutters?
Sharp knife. You really need to have a sharp knife. If you're a cutter, you need to have the sharp knife, because if your knife goes down, you're struggling, you're pushing harder, you have more force on your hand, elbow, and shoulder. So the trick is that, and there are tools out there that are ergonomically, different kinds of hooks, different kinds of gloves. Some people believe in wearing wristbands and things like that. I'm old school. That just makes it worse, because then you're bending your muscles in different ways that you shouldn't be doing.
I think not only having a sharp knife, making sure your equipment is working. If you've got a lift, making sure that the lift is actually working, making sure that the leg on the table or the conveyor belt isn't broken and hanging lower where somebody's got to lift something higher. And those are the types of things that Jim and myself and the reps on our staff, that they go in and they're inspecting these, and we make sure that they're fixed right away. But it's just making sure that all of our equipment is working. And if it's broken, you stop and get it fixed. Don't continue working when something isn't working properly, because that's when an injury is going to take place. Same with not having a sharp knife. If your knife's not sharp and you're struggling to cut something, that's when you make a mistake and you slip and cut yourself, or you just injure your wrist because you're pushing too hard.
And I'm going to jump in on this because we're not the same as what you guys are doing. But yes, sharp knife is by far key. But I'm going to give you an example. Here a while back, we had a balancer. We have a 444 well saw, right? And we have a balancer on it. And that balancer, the cable broke. So we took it down, and I had to put a new cable in it. And I get it all put back together, and it's out back. And I come through there this morning, and I swear, just this morning, I said to Luke, my guy, I said, we had the scissors lift in here, putting some new fan motors in our evaporators. I said, how come that balancer's not hung back up? Well, I forgot. Okay. Well, that's a guy now that's lifting that, 30, 35 pound saw and running around versus having the balancer on it. It was probably 2 weeks ago. We're getting into more and more pigs. And, we start cutting 120 hogs, and we cut the shoulder off, with a handsaw. Way old school, right? That's just the way we always did it. And we cut the shoulder off, cut the ham, and then we cut the belly from the loin. We've always used a handsaw. Well, I'm telling you, when these guys are getting tired, I called up Jarvis, and I said, show me what you got. Give me the best you got. Found the best saw I wanted. It's all air. And we got a balancer coming, but then, now you're 6 weeks out on a new saw because they got to put it together. But there's all those things that matter every single day of how much lifting you do. And me as a processor, I've been looking at this for years. I mean, the last grinder, mixer, stuffer, everything now has dumpers. I don't even want people lifting stuff anymore. You just got to keep them in shape. Yes, but you just can't make them work like a pack mule either.
Well, and we've only got about 5 minutes left. So I think I'm going to pose this question to all of you and invite you all to give your feedback. But how would diversifying and expanding meat processing infrastructure in Wisconsin impact workers, unions, and your shop?
I think the simplest answer is competition is always healthy. You have these big players that come in and they can dominate the industry. They push all the little guys out, and then they control wages, benefits, working conditions, everything. So the more competition you have in an area, the higher wages are going to go up, the better working conditions are going to go up, better safety protocols. Everything gets better the more competition there is. So I think having a much more diversified group of people in these smaller operations would only make the industry stronger, make the jobs more stable and more family supporting, be able to only have one person go to work rather than two people working 4 jobs. So.
Well, I guess I'll jump in and say that with our growth, with our expansion, it's my goals to obviously offer healthcare, but it's more about automation. And I know that's kind of where we're going with the first, well, not really the first 2 phases, but say by the 3rd phase of our operation with clientele that we're working with, it goes back to killing pigs. I mean, that's kind of where our first step's going to be, and killing a lot of them. So we're going to go with the CO2 pit, so we can kill 5, 6, maybe 10 at a time. Who knows? We'll work through that. And then it'll be more lines. Everything will be scalded. Everything will be built so that people can actually work their way down through the system and break them down, whether it's going to be custom fabrication for our own use or for a larger company that will be just breaking them into primals and then putting them in packages such as what Jim's doing, and then putting them in boxes and then shipping them out. But to me, it's all about automation for the future, making it better for my employees.
And see, we actually have some automation here. We have they just brought it in, a strip saw or a rib saw, cuts the chine bone off the rib. Garbage. I understand that it's better that, it's ergonomically right because you don't have the guy holding the rib while he's cutting that chine bone off. But we got a guy that's got to babysit it after it goes through the saw and re-saw it because it doesn't do good. So careful with your automation, I mean. So, but like in Green Bay here, we have two big players. We're union, they're not. So what happens is when we get a contractual raise, our competitor gives them their employees raises. So it's always I educate people that because we are union, we actually hold the standards to all the wages in the packing house division here in Brown County. So that's my story.
Well, thank you all for sharing all of your insight on this subject. I know there were a few questions that we didn't get to, but I think we got to most of them. And I really appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts and helping us better understand this question as we try and look for better solutions. With that, I want to thank everybody who was able to attend today. And just a reminder that we are looking for stories of your experience, either as a meat producer or working in a processing facility, as we look to kind of develop better solutions and share these stories more widely. There's a link that's been dropped in the chat, and hopefully Kirsten can drop it one more time to a place to share those stories. And also, we would love to have your participation in this work and other work through Wisconsin Farmers Union. You can learn more about our meat processing project on our website, as well as about our organization. So again, thank you all, and we appreciate the opportunity to work together as farmers and laborers and processors on these big issues. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.